When my husband passed away, everyone said, "You'll be fine, Margaret. You're strong." And I believed them. At 80, I still cooked my own meals, kept the house clean, and even tended to the roses out back. I told myself I was lucky. I had my independence. But no one told me about the silence. The first morning I woke up alone, the house felt unfamiliar. It wasn't the walls or the furniture, it was the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, but unsettles. No footsteps from the hallway. No kettle whistling because he forgot to turn it off. No voice saying, "Did you sleep well?" I tried to fill the silence. I turned on the TV. I called my daughter. I opened the windows to hear the birds. But none of it really worked. You can't replace the sound of another person just being there. People often imagine that living alone at this age means peace and freedom. They picture cozy reading nooks and warm cups of tea. And sure, I have those moments. But the parts no one sees are the afternoons when the phone doesn't ring. When you make a full pot of coffee, knowing no one will share it. When you catch yourself talking out loud, not for company, but just to hear a voice. I wasn't afraid to be alone, not in the way young people fear dark basements or empty streets. No, this fear is quieter. It sneaks up on you when you realize days have gone by since someone asked, "How are you, really?" Still, I didn't want pity. I wanted connection. I just didn't know how to ask for it. One evening, I stood in my kitchen holding a teacup. It slipped from my hand and shattered. I stared at the pieces on the floor, heart pounding. Not because of the noise, but because I had to face a truth. If I'd fallen too, who would know? That night, I sat in my chair and stared at the living room walls, wondering how long I could live like this. I had my health, yes, but what about my spirit? What about the part of me that longed to feel seen? They say living alone builds strength. Maybe that's true. But it also shows you just how fragile life becomes when there's no one there to witness it. It was a Wednesday afternoon, my errand day. I had my list, my reusable bags, and my usual route mapped out through the store. At first, everything felt normal. Bananas? Check. Canned soup? Check. But then I got to the bread aisle and stopped cold. There, in front of me, was a woman, probably in her 40s, with 2 kids tugging at her coat. She was laughing. Her son was whining about whole wheat versus white bread, and she gave him that tired, amused smile only mothers know how to give. She didn't notice me, of course. I was just another old lady with a cart. But I stood there, completely frozen. Because in that moment, I remembered exactly what it felt like to be her. Rushed. Needed. Surrounded by noise. And without warning, my eyes filled with tears. I wasn't sad because I missed bread. I was sad because I missed being important to someone. No one talks about how strange grocery shopping becomes when you live alone. You go from buying in bulk for a family to scanning expiration dates, making sure the milk won't spoil before you finish it. You skip the bakery section because a full cake is too much, and cupcakes feel like a sad replacement. You find yourself avoiding the couples and the young families, not because you dislike them, but because their presence reminds you of everything you once had. I remember standing in the frozen food section, staring at a bag of peas and whispering to myself, "Do I even want to cook tonight?" And the truth was, most nights, I didn't. Cooking, for one, is a strange thing. The joy is in feeding others, not just yourself. That night, I had toast for dinner. Just toast. Not because I couldn't cook, but because it felt pointless. Living alone means facing these tiny, silent moments of grief that no one warns you about. It's not about the big tragedies. It's about the little ones. The empty seat at the table. The echo of your footsteps down the hallway. The way you start saying things like, "Oh, it's fine," even when it's not. But I'm not sharing this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm sharing it because if you or someone you love is thinking about living alone in their later years, you need to know this life takes strength. Not just physical, but emotional strength too. Because sometimes, the hardest part of the day is the moment you realize no one noticed you were even out. I never expected to talk to myself out loud. Not really. Sure, I'd muttered things before. Where did I put my keys? Or, don't forget the laundry. But this was different. It was a gray morning. The kind where the sky hangs low and the silence in the house feels heavier than usual. I made my tea, sat at the kitchen table, and looked out the window. Nothing moved. Not a single car. Not even a bird. And that's when it happened. I said, "Well, Margaret, looks like it's just you and me again." And then I laughed. It wasn't a sad laugh, not at first. It was a quiet chuckle at the absurdity of it all. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the microwave door. I stared at it, and for a second, I forgot it was me. It felt like a stranger was sitting across from me. That's when the tears came. You see, when you live alone long enough, your world becomes smaller and quieter, but your thoughts get louder. You begin narrating your day just to feel some form of companionship. You ask yourself questions out loud and sometimes even answer them. You develop routines not because they're efficient, but because they give shape to the time. I told my daughter once that I talked to myself, expecting her to laugh. She didn't. She looked worried. She said, "Mom, are you lonely?" And I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth is, I am alone. But lonely? That's more complicated. There's a difference between being alone and feeling alone. Most days, I'm fine. I put on music. I water the plants. I read the same novel 3 times because I forget the plot. But some days, days like that gray morning, I feel invisible. Like the world kept turning and I somehow got left behind. It's not about needing constant attention or visits. It's about feeling connected, feeling like you matter. Because when there's no one around to share a moment with, no one to say, "Did you see that?" Or, "Wasn't that funny?" Life begins to feel more like a memory than something you're still living. But here's what I've learned. Even in solitude, you can find meaning. You have to. You have to make peace with your reflection, with the silence, with the rhythm of your own thoughts. Because waiting for someone else to fill the space only makes it feel emptier. So yes, I talk to myself. I talk to my plants. I say good morning to the sun when it rises. And you know what? That voice, that one I thought was just echoing into the air, it's still mine. And for now, that's enough. It arrived in the mail on a Tuesday. One of those days that looks no different from any other. The envelope was plain. No return address. My name written in neat, careful handwriting. I stared at it for a while before I opened it. Something about it made me hesitate. Inside was an invitation. My granddaughter Emily was graduating from college. There would be a small ceremony, followed by a family gathering at my daughter's house. The details were all there. Time, place, even a little handwritten note from Emily that said, "I hope you can come, Grandma." I put it on the kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea. I told myself I'd RSVP later. But days went by, and I didn't. You might wonder why. What kind of grandmother doesn't immediately say yes to something like that? It's not because I didn't want to go. It's because I wasn't sure I could. You see, when you live alone at 80, everything becomes a calculation. How will I get there? Will I have to climb stairs? What if I get tired halfway through the day? What if I need help and don't want to ask for it? And maybe, just maybe, I was afraid they didn't really want me there. Not out of malice, but out of inconvenience. I imagined them tiptoeing around my needs, whispering, "Grandma's tired," or "Let's keep it short." I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to be part of the celebration, not a complication. So the envelope sat, day after day. A symbol of something so many of us fear as we get older, being left out, or worse, being included out of obligation. Eventually, my daughter called. "Mom," she said gently, "Emily keeps asking if you're coming." And something in her voice, soft but insistent, made me realize something important. Maybe it's not about being perfectly capable anymore. Maybe it's just about showing up. So I did. I ironed my nicest blouse, took a cab, walked slower than I used to, but held my head high. And when Emily saw me, her whole face lit up. She ran to me, hugged me tight, and said, "I was hoping you'd come." That moment, it erased every doubt. Living alone can make you retreat into yourself. It can make you question your place in the lives of others. But sometimes, you have to fight those doubts. You have to remind yourself, and the people who love you, that you still want to be part of their world. That envelope taught me something. Presence matters more than perfection. And being there, even with all my fears and wrinkles and slow steps, was worth every second. There's a chair in my living room that sits by the window. It's nothing fancy, just a cushioned recliner with a slightly faded floral pattern, but it's mine. I sit there every morning with a cup of tea and watch the world wake up. That chair has become my anchor. It faces the street, so I can see the neighbors rushing off to work, kids running to catch the bus, dog walkers in the early light. Life in motion. I watch it all from my little spot, not quite part of it anymore, but not completely separate either. It's like standing just outside the party, listening to the music through the door. When you live alone, you start to notice things that others miss. The way the light changes in the afternoon, which neighbors wave, which ones don't. You build small routines around the simplest things. Not because you have to, but because you need to. That chair has seen me laugh at old memories, cry over unexpected moments of grief, and fall asleep mid-sentence while reading a book I've already read twice. It has become a place where I feel safe. Still, but not stagnant. One afternoon, I noticed a boy, maybe 10 years old, riding his bike past my house. He stopped, looked at my garden, and waved. I waved back. That became our ritual. Every few days, he'd ride by, I'd be in my chair, and we'd wave. Then, one day, he wasn't alone. He had a friend with him. He pointed to my house and said something I couldn't hear. His friend looked up and waved too. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. You'd be amazed how much that matters. When you live alone, you begin to feel like the world has moved on without you. But sometimes, all it takes is one small moment, one wave, one smile, one shared glance, to remind you that you still exist in someone else's world. I often wonder what people see when they walk past my house. An old woman sitting alone in a chair, or maybe, just maybe, someone who's still watching, still hoping, still quietly participating in life. Living alone doesn't mean giving up on connection. It just means you have to find new ways to experience it. Sometimes it's through a phone call, sometimes it's through your memories, and sometimes it's through a chair by the window and a boy on a bike. So, yes, I live alone. But from that little chair, I still see the world. And sometimes, the world sees me back. There's a clock in my hallway that ticks a little slower than it used to. Or maybe it just feels that way. When you live alone, time stretches. A morning can feel like a whole day, an afternoon like a week. The silence between the ticks becomes louder than the tick itself. At first, I didn't notice it. My days were full of little chores, laundry, dishes, writing letters I never sent. But as the years went on, those chores stopped filling the space. I began to measure my time in cups of tea, chapters of books, and how many times the mail truck passed by. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes not from the absence of people, but from the absence of urgency. When no one is waiting for you, when no one needs you to be somewhere at a certain time, the hours lose their shape. I used to rush, always rushing, raising kids, cooking meals, meeting deadlines, folding laundry while dinner simmered. I thought back then that I would give anything for a quiet, slow day. Now I have nothing but slow days, and I've learned that peace and stillness are not the same. One Thursday, I found myself just sitting, not reading, not watching TV, just sitting and listening to the clock. It was almost haunting, not because I was sad, but because I was aware that I was the only one hearing it. I wondered, what did I do today? And the answer didn't come quickly. Because when you live alone, not every day has a story. But here's the thing. I started writing one anyway. That evening, I pulled out an old notebook and wrote down everything I did remember. Fed the cat, watered the roses, watched the wind move the curtains, thought about my mother's cornbread recipe. And somehow, that felt like enough. Because living alone forces you to find meaning in the quiet. It teaches you to slow down, not just because you have to, but because maybe that's where life lives, in the in-between moments, the ones we rush past when we're younger. Now, when the clock ticks, I don't feel haunted. I feel present. Time doesn't need to be filled with noise to be valuable. Sometimes it just needs to be noticed. So if you're afraid of growing old alone, afraid of those long stretches of silence, don't be. There's beauty in the slow days too. You just have to learn to listen closely. Nighttime is different when you live alone. It's not just about turning off the lights or locking the doors. It's about the moment when everything goes still and stays that way. There's no one brushing their teeth in the next room. No distant murmur of a TV playing too loud. No shared good night or the sound of someone breathing beside you. When the light goes out, it's just you and the dark. At first, I dreaded it. I'd leave the hallway light on. I'd fall asleep with the radio playing softly, just to fill the silence. But after a while, even those little tricks lost their magic. The truth is, you can't distract yourself forever. At some point, you have to sit with yourself and whatever thoughts come creeping in when the world is quiet. Some nights, the memories flood in, the good ones, and the ones I'd rather forget. I remember holding my baby for the first time. I remember my husband's laugh at the dinner table. I also remember the hospital rooms, the funerals, the arguments I wish I could take back. Everything feels louder at night. But here's what surprised me. I learned to be gentle with myself in the dark. I learned to let the memories come and go without judgment, to cry if I needed to whisper, "I miss you," without feeling embarrassed. Because there's no one listening but me. And sometimes, that's enough. I also learned something else. Something many people don't understand until they live it. Independence is a kind of quiet strength. It's not about being fearless. It's about being willing to face the silence every night and still wake up in the morning ready to do it all again. One night, during a storm, the power went out. The house went completely black. I lit a candle and sat in my living room listening to the rain. And in that moment, I didn't feel afraid. I felt peaceful. The flicker of the flame reminded me that I still had light inside me, even when everything around me went dark. Living alone doesn't mean you have to live without warmth. It just means you become the keeper of your own flame. And with every night that passes, you learn how to protect it, nurture it, keep it from going out. So yes, some nights are hard, but some are beautiful too. Because when the light goes out, and you're still here, still breathing, still feeling, still remembering, you realize that solitude isn't the absence of love. Sometimes, it's where love echoes the loudest. If you had asked me 10 years ago what I feared most about aging, I would have said being alone. Not just physically, but emotionally. Being forgotten, overlooked, left behind. Now, here I am, 80 years old, alone in a house that once held laughter, arguments, love, and life. The walls remember. So do I. And yet, I'm still here, still learning, still growing in ways I never expected. Living alone isn't easy. It forces you to confront yourself, your thoughts, your regrets, your longings. There's no one to distract you from who you really are. That can be terrifying, but it can also be a gift. I've discovered that I'm stronger than I thought. I've repaired a leaky sink. I've figured out how to reset the Wi-Fi. I've taken myself out to lunch and didn't feel ashamed about the empty seat across from me. I've found joy in little routines, comfort in quiet mornings, and meaning in simply being present. I've also learned that being alone doesn't mean being unloved. Love still shows up. It shows up in a phone call from my grandson, in a neighbor who brings me soup when I'm under the weather, in the mailman who smiles and says, "Have a good day, Miss Margaret," in a memory that warms me from the inside out. It's not the kind of love that fills a room with noise, but it's real, and it matters. If you're watching this because you're afraid of what it means to grow old alone, let me tell you this. You will have hard days. You will have moments of doubt. You will wonder if anyone sees you. But you will also discover parts of yourself that were buried beneath years of busyness and noise. You will grow brave. You will grow tender. You will find strength in your stillness. You'll learn that silence doesn't have to mean loneliness, that solitude can be sacred, that your own company is not a punishment, but a quiet kind of grace. I don't know how many more years I have, but I do know this. I am still living, still loving, still laughing at my own silly jokes and crying at old movies and making toast at midnight just because I can. So no, living alone isn't easy, but it has taught me that I am enough. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of someone you love, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. What's one thing you've learned about solitude, aging, or resilience? And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell, because we're here to share more stories that speak to the heart. Thank you for watching, and wherever you are in your journey, just know you are not alone.